Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Jeffrey Epstein Show. I'm your host, Bobbycapucci, and this is a morning update. The Prince of Punk Asses has really stepped in it, hasn't he, folks? With all of his lies, all of his deceits, all of his BS. Well, all of his chickens are coming home to roost now. Not only do we have Steve Scully, who came forward and said that he saw the Prince of Punk Asses kissing and groping Virginia Roberts in the Virgin Islands. Well, we also have a former Royal Protection Officer coming forward and absolutely dismantling the Prince of Punk Ass's alibi on the night he was supposed to be at Sunninghill, like he said. Well, this protection officer has a different story to tell. And we all knew when Prince Andrew did the interview with Emily Maitlis that he was BSing. All you had to do was look at his body language. All you had to do was look at what he was saying and add it up with the things that we had already known. And we knew that he was telling stories. But it's not what we know, it's what we can prove, right? Well, this goes a long way in helping us prove that Prince Andrew, the Prince of Punk Asses, is a lying POS. And I have zero doubt at this point that he has lied about this whole entire situation, that he knew exactly who Virginia Roberts was, and he knew exactly who and what his good friend Jeffrey Epstein was as well. And for him to keep running around and acting like he has the high ground here, like he is somebody who can dictate the terms at this point, it's unreasonable, and it's not going to work for much longer. See, before it was, Virginia Roberts' word against Prince Andrew's word. Well, now we have witnesses coming out that are willing to go on the record, and this is just damning stuff, and this just throws a whole entire wrench in Prince Andrew's ridiculous alibi. So, we're going to jump into this article. It's from the Daily Mail. The authors were Michael Gillard and Mark Hookham for the Mail on Sunday. Headline: Former Royal Protection Officer says rude prince may have stayed at Buckingham Palace and not his Sunninghill home, as he claimed on night he is accused of sex with Epstein survivor Virginia Roberts. So Prince Andrew got hit with a serious 1-2 punch yesterday, and it's looking bad for him, folks. Really bad. A highly respected former Royal Protection Officer has raised questions about Prince Andrew's alibi for the night he allegedly had sex with teenage trafficking victim Virginia Roberts. Well, again, now we have Scully coming forward, who says that he saw what he saw in the Virgin Islands, and now somebody who was charged with protecting Prince Andrew, somebody who would know of his movements, somebody that has a behind-the-scenes look, is coming forward and calling into question Prince Andrew, the Prince of Punk Ass's alibi. In an interview with the Mail on Sunday, the officer says he believes the prince may have returned to Buckingham Palace in the early hours of March 11th, 2001. Contradicting his account of being at home all evening after taking his daughter Beatrice to Pizza Express in Woking. From the very beginning, I questioned this alibi, and I laughed at it and found it laughable and thought that there was nobody on the planet that was going to believe what this man was saying. So because you were at a pizza shop during the day with your daughters, that means you couldn't be at a nightclub abusing Virginia Roberts afterwards? What does that even mean? Miss Roberts, then 17, claims that earlier that night she was coerced into having sex with the Duke after being flown to London by serial pedophile Jeffrey Epstein. And again, she claims, allege, whatever. I'm past that point of using those titles. In my opinion, Virginia Roberts is 100% truthful. She's been 100% upfront, and it's obvious to anyone who's following the case who the liars are here, and it's certainly obvious to anyone following the case who the deceivers are. Speaking for the first time, the officer, who had an exemplary 23-year career in the Metropolitan Police, recalls how the Duke of York arrived by car at the front of the palace in the middle of the night and hurled abuse at guards when they did not open the gates quickly enough. Again, sounds like the prince, right? From the profile that we've created for him, for what we have seen from the information that's come out from people who know him, we know that he is an absolute moron. We know that he's abusive, and we know that he is not truthful with just about anything he says. So this account of him showing up and hurling abuse at guards and wanting them to open the gates faster, it fits right in with the pattern of his behavior. Crucially, he believes it could have been the same evening the Duke was alleged to have had sex with Miss Roberts at the home of at the home of co-conspirator Ghislaine Maxwell after dancing at Tramp nightclub in London. If correct, his bombshell account would shatter Andrew's so-called alibi. As if we need it to be shattered at this point. Everybody knows it's BS, but again, it's not what we know, it's what we can prove. So when we have corroborating witnesses and we have people like this man coming forward and saying that Andrew is telling tall tales, that is how you get an ironclad case built, folks. The officer has neither requested nor received payment for this interview and wishes to remain anonymous, but he says he has spoken out through a desire to see justice done. And look, I gave Steve Scully props for coming out and going on the record and using his name and, putting it out there for the world to see. But not everybody's comfortable doing that. Sources aren't always comfortable putting their name behind their statement because this is a very dangerous, toxic situation. And there are a lot of people who have a lot to lose here. And we're not talking about people who are dead already or people who are in jail. We're talking about very powerful people who are at risk of being exposed for some of the most heinous crimes in the modern history of the American government. And if you think that these people will not go to any lengths possible to protect themselves, you are sorely mistaken. So I can understand why people don't want to go on the record. I can understand why people want to be anonymous. And I can understand how people are torn with that decision because they have information about the case, but they don't want to come forward because they know what happens to people who come forward in this country, what happens to whistleblowers. And it's not a good thing. It's not a good situation. It's not a safe situation, especially when we're talking about this high level of power and, not even just power, folks, just the whole entire image that these people project is even more than power. It freezes people because they know the end result if they try and go against them. So I could totally see why this officer wants to stay anonymous. And, we're going to see a lot of that in this case. We're going to see anonymous sources. But what you see with them when they come out, the stories are all lining up and they all fit the MO. He has agreed to speak to the lawyers acting for Epstein's victims who have repeatedly urged the prince to cooperate with them. The astonishing claims provided in an affidavit signed by the officer are also likely to be seized upon by the FBI. Wow. So not only did he come out with these statements and he's anonymous in the public, but he signed an affidavit, so I'm guessing the investigators know who he is. So you should expect for this man to be spoken to by the FBI along with Steve Scully to get a bigger profile and add some more meat to the bone and get themselves in a position where if they do file a subpoena against Andrew, he really will be in no place to deny answering it. Agents went to talk to the Duke about Epstein, a prolific sex offender who abused Miss Roberts and killed himself last year while awaiting trial on sex trafficking charges. Agents want to talk to the Duke about Epstein. His account will heap new pressure on the Metropolitan Police to disclose any information it holds on Andrew's whereabouts on the day he was accused of having sex with Miss Roberts, 24 years his younger. And the Metropolitan Police should be forthcoming with whatever they have. Bring it forward, put it forward, and let's get this case moving. Let's get some justice here. Let's get the prince on record. He said he would go on record. He has not done so of his own free will yet, so he must be compelled to do so. The forces previously refused to reveal where the Duke's police bodyguards were that day, claiming the information could put national security at risk. That's such BS. There's no national security implications here. What they're trying to do is save face. They know that they were helping the prince as he was cavorting around, and the Metropolitan Police Department wants to make sure that they save face. They want to make sure that their image isn't tarnished by their egregious behavior. But the former officer intends to use data protection and freedom of information laws to access his own shift roster and other documents to confirm whether his account is correct. Having considered Prince Andrew's alibi with my own recollections, it is my belief that the abusive confrontation with the royal could have been in the early hours of Sunday, March 11th, 2001, said the officer. To be 100% certain, I would like access to my duty roster for that month. I believe I have a right to know my own shift patterns. I agree with him here. The question, if he's going to get access to this is going to be another thing entirely. It might need a court order for them to turn over this documentation, but I don't blame the guy, right? Look, I want to know what my shift was that night. I want to know if I have pertinent information in this case. How dare you stand in the way of that? Last night, Lisa Bloom, my favorite, a Los Angeles-based lawyer who represents several of Epstein's victims, said, "We have been hoping that another witness would come forward, and we encourage any others to contact me as well." Look, I don't understand. Lisa Bloom does not represent Virginia Roberts, and I understand she's trying to get some movement in the case here. But again, contact me as well. It's always about her. It's always about Gloria Allred. It's never about the people that they're defending. It's just it makes me ill, honestly. They both make me ill. Allred and Bloom both make me sick. I would be delighted to speak with the officer. It is now more imperative than ever that Prince Andrew does as he promised and cooperates with the FBI's investigation. A lawyer representing several other victims said he was keen to meet the officer too, adding, "We have been urging Prince Andrew to tell the FBI what he knows, and we continue to do so." Miss Roberts, now 36, Miss Roberts, who is now 36, alleges she was ordered to have sex with the Duke at the Belgravia home of Miss Maxwell, which is barely a mile from Buckingham Palace. This was the first of 3 alleged sexual encounters with the prince. Well, look, it makes sense that he would stay at Buckingham Palace, like this guard is saying, if it's only a mile away from the Belgravia home of Maxwell, right? Why would he go all the way back to the other pad when he can go right here to Mummy's house after he's done being a sick, disgusting pervert with his friends? See, it all lines up, folks. The evidence all lines up. Everything lines up perfectly. It's like the puzzles coming together. Andrew, the Prince of Punkasses, has repeatedly and categorically denied having sexual contact with Miss Roberts and, for the first time, provided an alibi during a disastrous interview with the BBC's Newsnight in November. Speaking to Emily Maitlis, he said it couldn't have happened because he was at home with his children. Again, what sort of scumbag drags his children into his alibi when he's accused of sexually assaulting a young girl around the age of his daughters? What sort of piece of human excrement would use his daughters as an alibi? I was at home. I was with the children, and I taken Beatrice to a Pizza Express in Woking for a party at, I suppose, 4 or 5 in the afternoon, he said. And then, because the Duchess was away, we have a simple rule in the family that when one is away, the other is there. He specifically remembered this because going to Pizza Express in Woking is an unusual thing for me to do. Asked if he was absolutely sure that you were at home on March 10th, he replied, "Yeah." Look, this guy he's just too much. He has a simple rule that if either him or the Duchess is away, one of them has to be home? Yeah, right. Your kids were born in purple. Your kids were raised by nannies. Your kids were raised by au pairs. Your kids were raised by other people. You and your wife, the disgusting Fergie, weren't home raising these kids. Prince of Punkasses, who you kidding, buddy? But for the experienced former police officer, Prince Andrew's explanation stirred a troubling memory from his time serving at Buckingham Palace with SO-14, Scotland Yard's elite royalty protection command. On taking up his job in January 2000, the officer was warned that Andrew had a reputation for being rude. Of course he does. He's the prince of punk asses. For example, he would go to Buckingham Palace kitchens late at night with the munchies and set off the alarms, the officer said. We wouldn't get sent to deal with him. It would have to be an inspector. He wouldn't engage with officers of my rank. The inspectors told us about their experiences with Andrew. I remember in my head he would shout phrases like, I'll go where I want. It's my house. Wow, a full-grown version of Joffrey, folks. If you watched Game of Thrones or read the books, this is a full-grown version of Joffrey. What a sick and depraved, disgusting individual. You know, everyone is below him because of his blood. Just because he happened to be born into the Mountbatten Windsor clan, he is better than you. He is above you. He has a charter where he can abuse anybody he wants in whatever way he wants, be it verbally or physically, because his blood says so. It has been widely assumed that the home referred to by Andrew in the Newsnight interview was Sunninghill Park, the Berkshire mansion he shared with ex-wife Sarah Ferguson and their daughters. It is about 10 miles from Woking. But the account of the Duke's angry insistence that Buckingham Palace, where he has a private apartment, was his house, raises questions about whether he may have been referring to the palace in the Newsnight interview. I wish Mateless would have got a little clarification there. But she did a really bang-up job in that interview, so I'm not going to hold that little portion against her. But in hindsight, it would have been nice for some clarification there. The former officer said that there was a period in 2000 and 2001 when women would arrive unannounced at Buckingham Palace to see Andrew. And again, we've heard this. We've also heard that Ghislaine Maxwell, when she would come over, she wouldn't be put into the logbook. So again, there's a pattern that fits what this officer is saying. His story fits in with the other evidence that we have already compiled. They included the model Caprice Borette and on at least one occasion, Miss Maxwell. We know it was a lot more than that. I remember Maxwell visiting once when I was on duty, he said. She just turned up without any appointment. Her name was not in the security book, and we were told to let her in. In 2000, news of Andrew's friendship with Miss Borette made headlines. In a magazine interview at the time, he said, "Of course I know Caprice, but just because I have dinner with someone who is blonde and incredibly pretty, it does not mean it should end up in the newspapers. No, how dare you report on what the Prince of Punk Asses is doing? How dare you report that he's on a date? How dare you? How dare you?" He's much better than that. He's much bigger than that. You can't report on his comings and goings, you peasant. In 2000, unlike other senior royals, Andrew, the officer said, did not want to tell police what he was doing and resented when they kept records about his guests. Kind of sounds like when Bill Clinton would duck and dodge his Secret Service agents to hop onto that old plan of Jeffrey Epstein's, doesn't it, folks? He always feels the police are prying and we shouldn't know things. We shouldn't be writing stuff down about his guests. That has nothing to do with us. No, nothing at all. How are they supposed to keep you safe if they don't have a running total of who's coming and going, who they are, what they're up to, etc., etc.? I mean, really? So basically, you don't want them to do their jobs, Prince Andrew, because them doing their jobs, they might see something that might be incriminating, and you might have to answer for it down the line. Well, breaking news. We're down the line. Time to answer for it. According to the officer, the most extraordinary example of the Duke's hostility towards the police came in what the XPC now believes may have been the early hours of March 11th, 2001. The officer, who regularly worked Saturdays, weekends, was on duty at the North Center Gate, the main route through which cars enter and leave Buckingham Palace. He recalls Andrew leaving the palace earlier during the evening in what he believes was a green Jaguar. Wow. Wow. The former officer remembers Andrew and his bodyguard returning to the palace in the car in the early hours. The Duke was furious the gates had been closed. How dare you close the gates to the castle? How dare you drop the drawbridge when the prince is coming home with his retinue? How dare you? I recall that a car arrived at the North Central Gate, the former officer said. Its lights were flashing. The horn was blaring. I thought, God, Who the hell is that? I go out quick, and I'm thinking, damn, it's him. He's back. It was Prince Andrew. The Duke apparently used his bodyguard's radio to shout abuse at the shocked, uniformed officers on the gate. The abuse started as soon as the lights were flashing outside the North Center gate, and it continued until the North Arch was unlocked, he said. The reason the incident is so unusual is because, firstly, Prince Andrew was on the police radio in the car, and secondly, because he was shouting abuse through the radio. The abuse, I remember, was phrases such as, "Open these bloody gates, you buffoons! Get these bloody gates open!" He was not swearing, but using abusive language and a raised voice. I found the experience belittling. All my colleagues would have heard it, including those in the control room. Again, Andrew does not give a hell or a damn about any of you, about anyone, none of us. Not about the guards protecting him, not about the servants who are working inside of the castle, not about his subjects, and he certainly does not give a damn about Virginia Roberts. The Duke has repeatedly been accused of boorish behavior and impatience. In 2016, it was reported that he rammed closed gates in Windsor Great Park with his Range Rover to avoid a 1-mile detour to his home in Royal Lodge. God forbid the prince has to take a detour. God forbid the prince has to go out of his way for 1 measly mile. Instead, I'm going to get behind the wheel of my 4,500-pound vehicle and I'm going to ram the gates. The Prince of Punk Asses is truly a punk ass. The former officer who retired in 2009 with a certificate of exemplary service has understandably never forgotten the extraordinary night when he says the Queen's second son behaved so appallingly. He said, "After seeing the BBC interview, it dawned on me that the abusive incident I experienced could cast doubt on Prince Andrew's alibi if it were the same night. If I am correct, Prince Andrew could have returned to Buckingham Palace from Pizza Express or Sunninghill Park in the early evening. Then he left, went to Tramp and Maxwell's house, which is very close to the palace, and returned to his private quarters in the early hours of the morning." It is not the first time that Andrew's alibi has been questioned. In December, this newspaper revealed that a witness had come forward to corroborate claims that the Duke was dancing with Miss Roberts in Tramp. Well, not only has she corroborated now, we also have this officer, and there was another girl, one of her friends, who said the same thing. So I don't understand how the Prince of Punk Asses is avoiding a subpoena at this point. Who is protecting him and why? It is not the... And despite claiming to be puzzled at his party prince reputation, the Mail on Sunday also discovered that he had attended a birthday party at Tramp thrown for racehorse breeder Guy Sangster just 72 hours after Miss Roberts claims that she had been there with him. The detailed testimony from the former officer raises fresh questions over the Met's initial investigation into Miss Roberts' claims in 2015. They didn't really even do an investigation, folks. It was half-assed at best. She made a criminal complaint against Epstein and Maxwell in July of that year, but in November 2016, Scotland Yard decided not to proceed with an inquiry. It is understood the complaint did not include any criminal allegations against the prince. However, the former protection officer says that as well as his own roster, the Met is likely to hold other records that could confirm his account as guest and the time they arrived were always recorded in a security book. We need to see this book. The Met needs to turn this book over to evidence, and we need to see what's what. Because, look, how long are we going to tap dance around the facts here? How long are we going to walk on eggshells because this man is a royal? How long are we going to avoid doing the hard job of making sure that these people are brought to justice? It's possible for people to come in at a moment's notice, but it still gets put in the book on arrival, he said. The duty rosters and any notes or reports written by Andrew's personal protection officers could also provide crucial evidence. you know what? I have a funny feeling that this evidence is going to disappear like the Jeffrey Epstein tape did. If they don't get to this evidence soon and it doesn't get put into a place where it can be safeguarded, this evidence will certainly disappear. Much of the evidence that would prove or disprove what Virginia Roberts and I are saying is held by the Metropolitan Police in its Human Resources Department and the Royal Protection Department, he said. These include sickness records, duty rosters, annual leave, advanced security checks, palace appointment books, especially for the North Center Gate. There must be so many files. With the police, everything is written down. The question is everything saved? Because again, we saw here in America how casually they handled the chain of evidence and what resulted in their ignorance. The videotape from Jeffrey Epstein's first attempt disappears. Then they say they were filming the wrong tier. So what I mean here is we have to be careful about these folks holding on to this evidence because things seem to have a habit of disappearing in this case. The former PC said he informed his duty inspector about Andrew's behavior but was told not to make a formal complaint. He said these stories about dealings with Prince Andrew go nowhere, so just swallow it. Consequently, I made no complaint, but I never forgot about the incident. Of course, who are they going to report him to? His mom? His mom is running cover for him. I hate to bust on the Queen, but we have so many patterns here, right? We've seen it so many times, and the Queen sending him as a representative to speak to the Chinese ambassador while he's under all of this scrutiny, and then for, anyone to think that the Queen is going to admonish Andrew in the best of times when she doesn't in the worst of times, well, they're sorely mistaken. So it's unfortunate, but the Queen is enabling Andrew's behavior and has been. The Mail on Sunday has spoken to the inspector who recalls the source complaining about Andrew's behavior at the gate, but could not recall when the incident took place. Two of the Duke's former bodyguards declined to comment last night, as did a spokesman for Prince Andrew. Subpoena the lot of them. RICO charges, then subpoenas all of these people. The Met said it would consider any request by the ex-officer for his records, but added, "We are not prepared to discuss records that we may or may not hold regarding matters of protection." It said its position on Miss Roberts' complaint in 2015 has not changed since last November, when it issued a statement that said the Met was not the appropriate authority to investigate because it would be largely focused on activities and relationships outside the UK. Wow. Wow, folks. So, there you have it. The second witness in 2 days that's come forward with damning information about Prince Andrew. Now, we know that they're going to spin a story. Right now, they're in overdrive trying to concoct a story to spin it to try and make it look not as bad about Prince Andrew's actions. But no matter what they come up with, no matter what tale they decide to weave, no matter what BS story they try to run, none of it means anything until Prince Andrew, the Prince of Punk Asses, goes under oath and answers the questions that need answering. Until then, he is highly, highly unworthy of any sort of trust, any sort of leeway. He doesn't get any of that because he's done nothing but lie this whole entire time, and for decades now has been a key part of Virginia Roberts and her mental anguish and her burden that she has carried ever since this man has done what he did to her. And for him to come out and lie the way he did in that interview, I don't know what was going on in his mind for him to think that there weren't going to be witnesses that came forward and called his story into question and called it for the BS that it is. But here we are. And like I said last night, I think things are heating up, folks. I truly think things are heating up, and I truly believe that this year we're going to see some major breaks in this case, and we're going to see major arrests. I'm not Miss Cleo here. I don't have a crystal ball. I'm not going to say who was getting arrested. I don't know. I truly don't know. But I believe that there will be arrests in this case, and I believe that we will see them by the end of this year. As for Prince Andrew, the Prince of Punk Asses, my man, you have a long road ahead of you, and it'll be a fine day when they drop that subpoena on you. To the rest of you out there listening to the podcast, thank you for joining me. If you'd like to contact me, you can do that at bobbycapucci@protonmail.com. That's BOBBYCAPUCCI@protonmail.com. And if you enjoy our work and you like the content and you would like to help support the podcast, you can click on the GoFundMe inside of the description box. All right, everybody, enjoy your day, and I will be back later on tonight with the Daily Drop.